Pretend you're with me, and I promise, your sister will regret every word she said tonight."
Those words from a complete stranger turned the most humiliating evening of my life into a moment of the sweetest revenge I could have never imagined. If your family has ever shamed you for being single, hit the like button. Subscribe if you believe karma always finds the most unexpected and creative ways to strike back, because this story proves one thing: the best revenge is the jealousy that can't be disguised behind a fake smile. And before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. It's always great to know how far our stories travel. The ballroom of the Golden Valley Resort was bathed in golden light, glowing under crystal chandeliers the size of car wheels, sparkling with thousands of reflections from mirrored decor. It looked like a dream, lavish, elegant, and perfectly orchestrated down to the smallest detail. White orchids stood tall in glass vases, ivory silk drapes framed the walls, and a live string quartet played soft romantic melodies. It was a fairy tale wedding, the kind you see in glossy magazines. But for me, that fairy tale night turned into a personal nightmare the moment I saw my place card, handwritten in elegant calligraphy. Table 12. The very last one in the room, tucked away in the corner near the swinging kitchen doors. Every 30 seconds a waiter burst through, carrying heavy trays that brushed against my chair as they hurried by, muttering quick apologies. The smell of grilled meat, clattering dishes, shouts from the kitchen, that was my company for the night. My name is Anna, I'm 32, and for the past 8 years I've worked as a marketing specialist at one of the biggest tech companies in Chicago. My life is busy, full of challenging projects, business trips abroad, and professional achievements I'm proud of. I own my own apartment, bought with my own money. I love hiking. So far, I've conquered several peaks in the Rocky Mountains, and my dream is to hike in the Alps one day. I have friends, hobbies, and plans for the future. But to my younger sister Melissa, none of that mattered. To her, I was nothing but the family disappointment, a living reminder that time is ticking and your personal life is going nowhere. In her world, a woman without a man was incomplete, half a person still searching for her missing piece. Melissa and I were never close. The age gap between us was only 4 years, yet the distance felt like the Grand Canyon. She was always the baby of the family, Mom's favorite, the doll-faced charmer with a manipulative streak. I was the responsible one, the serious one, the one everyone could rely on. In other words, reliable, boring, and convenient. But a year and a half ago, when she got engaged to Andrew, a successful investment banker from a wealthy Chicago family that owned a chain of restaurants and several downtown properties, our cold rivalry turned into an outright war. A one-sided war, because for a long time, I didn't even realize I was fighting. Melissa had already been celebrating her victories, trampling my dignity every chance she got. "Annie, maybe you should try those dating apps again," she'd ask sweetly during family dinners, pretending to care. "Everyone's using them these days, even serious men. You just need the right profile. Want me to help? I'll tell you which pictures to choose, what to write about yourself. Just don't be too picky, Annie," she'd add, sipping her wine and glancing at her engagement ring, a diamond the size of a fingertip. "Time doesn't wait forever, and you can't chase perfection. Realistic expectations, remember?" Mom would usually nod along in agreement, pressing her lips and throwing me disappointed looks, as if I were some hopeless snob rejecting hordes of decent men for no reason. The truth? There were no decent candidates at all. Just dates that went nowhere and short-lived flings that ended in mutual disappointment. No one who truly stirred my heart. Dad would try to defuse the tension with an awkward joke about the weather, football, or politics, anything neutral to change the subject. But Melissa wouldn't stop. It was as if she took twisted pleasure in every failed date, every mention of my quiet weekends alone, every reminder of my so-called unfinished life. My loneliness seemed to make her happiness shine brighter, her victory feel greater. On the morning of her wedding day, she called me with one final, kind piece of advice, something clearly designed to crush whatever was left of my self-esteem. "Annie, sweetheart, I know today might be emotionally hard for you, she said in that overly gentle tone people use with children or the terminally ill. There'll be so many happy couples, so much love and romance. Just please try not to look too sad or lonely in the photos, okay? The photographer is really expensive, and I'd hate for your face to ruin the mood. And please, don't spend the whole evening at the bar with a glass of wine like you did at Cousin Sarah's wedding. Remember how everyone whispered afterward? It was so embarrassing. I should have recognized that as a warning. It wasn't concern, it was the calm before the storm. But I still wanted to believe my own sister wouldn't be cruel enough to turn her wedding into a public humiliation of her big sister. God, how wrong I was. When I arrived at the Golden Valley Resort in my modest white sedan, parking between enormous SUVs and luxury sedans, I wore my best navy blue silk dress. I'd spent 3 weeks searching for it, visiting nearly every mall in Chicago, and spending about $1,500, half my monthly salary, but it was worth it. The dress fit perfectly, highlighting my figure while staying elegant and refined. I had my hair professionally styled into soft curls and did my makeup flawlessly. I looked good, really good, and for a brief moment, it gave me confidence. But that confidence vanished the moment Kate, Melissa's best friend and maid of honor, her loyal ally in every scheme, walked up to me. Holding a thick folder with the seating chart and wearing a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, she said in a syrupy sweet tone people usually use to sugarcoat bad news. "Oh, Annie. I'm so happy to see you. You look absolutely stunning. Come, let me show you your table." Melissa spent so much time arranging everything so everyone would be comfortable. And there it was, table 12. The table for misfits, for the ones invited out of politeness but never really expected. Seated there were 3 of Melissa's single co-workers in their mid-20s who barely nodded at me before diving back into a lively discussion about their latest dating disasters. The only other person was our elderly Aunt Helen, my grandmother's sister, a woman in her 70s with a permanently disapproving face. She immediately began complaining about the loud music, the cold salad, and how young people today don't value family anymore. "You know, Annie," she said, peering at me over thick glasses, "back in my day, women your age already had 3 kids and a good husband. You work too much, dear. Career is fine, but real happiness, real woman's happiness, is something else. You should lower your standards, stop being so picky. Otherwise, it might be too late. Your clock is ticking, sweetheart." I nodded, gripping my champagne glass so hard my knuckles turned white, half afraid the delicate stem would snap in my hand. But the worst, the truly humiliating part, was still ahead. The real nightmare began about an hour later, when the celebration was in full swing. Guests had loosened up after a few toasts and glasses of champagne, and Melissa decided it was the perfect time to make me the living example of how not to live one's life. She appeared beside my table in her dazzling designer wedding gown, a dress that cost as much as a new car. I knew the price exactly, because she'd made sure to brag about it at every opportunity. She grabbed my hand with surprising force and dragged me across the ballroom toward a group of Andrew's relatives, people who radiated money, status, and entitlement from every pore. These were the kind of people for whom vacations in the Maldives were routine, a car worth $100,000 was just a daily ride, and a watch costing as much as an apartment was merely an accessory. "Everyone, meet my big sister, Anna," Melissa announced loudly, her voice overly cheerful and theatrical enough to draw the attention of nearby tables. She slid her arm around Andrew's shoulder, leaning in as if staking her claim. "Our family workaholic. Annie's always busy, always working, such a perfectionist. No time for a personal life at all. She still hasn't met her special someone yet, but we're all rooting for her, right, Annie?" The fake sweetness in her tone mixed with a smug satisfaction that sent a chill down my spine. Andrew's relatives smiled politely but with a clear hint of pity. Mrs. Margaret, his 60-something aunt in an elegant suit and heavy gold jewelry, looked me up and down with the same expression people reserve for stray animals at a shelter. "Oh, my dear girl," she said, shaking her head sympathetically. "Don't worry so much. Everyone has their own path, their own timing. Maybe you should start going to church more often. Pray a little, light some candles." My nephew William was the same, worked all the time, never dated. Then he met a nice girl at church. Very devoted, they married right away. Of course, they divorced 2 years later, personality clash, but still, it's worth a try. Melissa laughed, a sharp, triumphant laugh with nothing kind or warm about it. "Our Annie is such an independent woman, aren't you, sis?" she said, the word independent sounding more like a medical diagnosis than a compliment. "Her standards are sky high, impossible to meet. I keep telling her, Annie, come down to earth, life isn't a fairy tale." "I just haven't met the right person yet," I managed to say, trying to keep my dignity intact and stop tears from welling up in front of all these strangers who clearly felt superior. "You can't wait for Prince Charming forever, dear," interrupted Mrs. Patricia, Andrew's elegant mother with her perfectly styled hair and icy smile. She adjusted her designer clutch, a bag that probably cost as much as my monthly salary. My older daughter did the same thing, waited and waited for the perfect man. Ended up marrying at 43, and now she can't have kids. Biological clock's a cruel thing. Don't make the same mistake, darling. Time doesn't stop. I felt shame and anger knotting inside me, shame for standing there as their public example of failure, anger at Melissa for orchestrating this humiliating spectacle, and anger at myself for letting it happen. But the next hour was even worse. It became a parade of unsolicited advice from people I'd never met, all suddenly convinced they had the right to tell me how to live my life. Gregory, one of Andrew's business partners, a heavy-set man in his 50s with a gold watch and a brandy glass in hand, nodded wisely. "You know, Anna," he said, as an experienced man, "let me tell you something, women today expect too much. You all want a prince, but let's be honest, most of you aren't princesses. Find a decent guy with a job and no bad habits, and you'll be fine." Daniel, one of Andrew's family friends, a talkative man who'd clearly had too much to drink, decided to share an inspiring story. "My aunt got married for the first time at 50, he exclaimed enthusiastically. "To a widower with 6 kids. And you know what? They're doing fine. Sure, the kids didn't like her at first, but that's just details. The point is, she's not alone. See? It's never too late." Even the photographer, Jake, a young guy with trendy hair and a professional camera, couldn't resist throwing in his comments. When it was time for family group photos, he kept asking whether I had a date, who I came with, where my partner was. When I repeated for the 3rd time, "I came alone," he raised his brows and said, half-jokingly, "Seriously? A gorgeous girl like you, alone at a wedding? That's kinda sad. You really should change that, sweetheart." I stood there, smiling, nodding, saying something polite and meaningless, but inside, a storm of humiliation and helpless anger was building. Every comment felt like a slap, every piece of advice like a punch to the soul. But the real, crushing climax of this nightmare came during the traditional bouquet toss. "All right, ladies. All the single women, onto the dance floor," announced Mark, the DJ, with his overly cheerful radio host voice. In his tone I could clearly hear that mocking note, as if he was saying, "Let's see all the unlucky ones who still haven't found a husband." I tried to melt into the crowd, hide behind one of the decorative columns, pretending to fix my shoe, acting as if I didn't hear the call. But Kate, Melissa's loyal maid of honor, spotted my attempt to escape. She crossed the entire hall, grabbed my hand firmly, and pulled me toward the dance floor. "Come on, Annie. Don't be shy. Maybe you'll get lucky and catch the bouquet. It's good luck," she chirped, her voice dripping with fake excitement that made me want to either run or punch her in the face. I found myself surrounded by a circle of giggling, excited young women, most of them Andrew's cousins and friends, fresh out of college, full of optimism and confidence that their lives would turn out far better than that of the poor 32-year-old woman. Among these radiant, hopeful girls, I felt like a fossil at a kid's birthday party, an artifact from another era. Melissa stood with her back to us, holding a stunning bouquet of white roses, violet flowers, and baby's breath tied with satin ribbons. I saw her slowly turn around, her eyes locking on me in the crowd, a smug, wicked grin spreading across her lips. And then, deliberately and dramatically, she threw the bouquet as far away from me as she possibly could. It sailed in a perfect arc and landed right in the hands of Olivia, Andrew's 24-year-old cousin, a pretty blonde who squealed so loudly with excitement it made my ears ring. The guests erupted in laughter and cheers, applauding loudly. Everyone congratulated Olivia, predicting her upcoming wedding. Melissa hugged the happy girl, then turned to me and said loudly enough for the whole room to hear. "Oh, what a shame. Looks like my big sister will have to wait a little longer. But don't worry, sweetie, your time will come. Just keep believing in yourself." The room laughed again, and that laughter cut through me like shards of broken glass. Some faces looked at me with pity, some with relief that it wasn't their humiliation, and others with detached amusement, as if it were just another part of the entertainment. I stood there in the middle of the dance floor, under dozens of staring eyes, and felt something inside me shatter into dust. This wasn't just embarrassment, it was the deep, paralyzing realization that my own sister had carefully planned her wedding to publicly destroy my dignity. I stumbled back to my cursed table 12, barely holding back tears that burned my eyes. Melissa's co-workers didn't even glance up from their chatter. Aunt Helen shook her head and said, "You see, dear, even fate is sending you a sign. You need to change something before it's too late." That evening was supposed to be a celebration of love, joy, and family unity. Instead, Melissa had turned it into a public spectacle, one where I was the main loser, the object of pity and ridicule. I seriously considered just leaving, quietly slipping out, getting in my car, and driving away while everyone danced and laughed, without anyone noticing the lonely, unwanted sister of the bride disappearing into the night. Let Melissa have her victory without me. But before I could gather the courage to give her that satisfaction, to let her see me surrender and walk away, I heard a low, calm, confident male voice behind me. "Pretend you're with me." I turned sharply and saw a man who looked like he'd just stepped out of a business magazine cover, tall, about 6 feet 3 inches tall, with an athletic build that even his perfectly tailored gray suit couldn't hide. Dark hair with a touch of gray at the temples, a strong jawline, and eyes, warm brown eyes filled with empathy and determination. "Excuse me?" I breathed, thinking I must have misheard. "Your sister's been standing over there by the bar for the last 15 minutes, he said, nodding toward where Melissa's white figure was clearly visible, telling my colleague Gregory how much she worries about you, how you just can't seem to find a man or build a personal life. Very touching, really. But I doubt you gave her permission to share the intimate details of your love life with strangers at her own wedding, did you?" He spoke calmly, almost casually, but there was irony and a quiet understanding in his voice. I followed his gaze and, sure enough, saw Melissa at the bar, gesturing animatedly in my direction as she leaned toward Gregory, the same man who'd lectured me earlier about lowering my standards. Her expression was exaggeratedly concerned, her gestures full of theatrical sympathy. "Would you mind if I sit with you and pretend we're together?" the stranger asked, his tone suggesting that the decision was already made, that he was simply offering a favor I'd be rude to decline. I silently shook my head, unable to form words. My throat tightened with a mix of relief, gratitude, and disbelief. For the first time that humiliating evening, I didn't feel invisible, pitted, or like the family disgrace. I felt human again, seen, protected. "William," he said, extending his hand. His handshake was warm, steady, confident. "Andrew's cousin. Born in Chicago, but I've been living and working in London for the past 5 years. Came to my cousin's wedding, and apparently stumbled into quite the family performance. And you, if I understood the conversation correctly, are the big sister everyone's so determined to rescue from the terrible curse of eternal singleness. There was light irony in his tone, but not a hint of malice, only kindness. I couldn't help but laugh. It was the first genuine laugh I'd had all night, not the polite kind you give to keep up appearances. Yeah, that's me, I said. The family charity project, the universal object of pity and unsolicited advice. Well, as of this moment, that's over, he said with that disarming, mischievous smile that made faint crinkles appear at the corners of his eyes. He pulled his chair closer, sat beside me, rested his arm on the back of my chair, and leaned in slightly, just enough to make it look, from the outside, like we were a couple who'd known each other for years. A couple with history, with closeness. The effect was immediate and electrifying. I could almost feel the ripple of attention spreading across the room. A few people at a nearby table turned their heads, whispering to each other. Then more joined in. The whispers spread like ripples on water, fast, unstoppable, drawing more and more eyes toward us. Melissa, still chatting near the bar with the wedding planner, must have sensed the shift in the atmosphere. She suddenly turned her head toward us, and I watched her face change, carefree to surprised, surprised to skeptical. Her perfect bridal smile froze, faltered, and twisted. Then she stormed toward our table, her white train gliding behind her like the tail of an angry comet. "Annie," she exclaimed, her voice a pitch higher than usual, strained with disbelief. "I had no idea you knew William. You never mentioned him. How long have you two known each other? Where did you meet?" The questions came fast, sharp, insistent. "Old friends," William replied evenly, his hand brushing mine on the table as naturally as if he'd done it 1,000 times before. "We lost touch for a while, life got in the way, you know how it is." Melissa squinted slightly, her mind clearly racing, trying to piece things together. Her perfectly drawn eyebrows lifted in suspicion. "Really? That's strange," she said slowly, struggling to keep her composure. "Annie never mentioned you." "Not once. We're sisters, we share everything." "I prefer to keep my personal life private," I said, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something stir inside me, confidence, dignity, a sense of control. "You know me, Mel, I'm a total stickler for work-life balance. I don't like putting everything on display." It was a subtle jab, but she felt it. Her smile grew tighter. The situation was almost comical. Melissa had spent the entire evening parading my loneliness for everyone to see, turning my single status into a family spectacle, and now she was standing in front of me, burning with curiosity, desperate for details about the relationship that had suddenly appeared and shattered her carefully planned humiliation. "How wonderful," she finally managed, her tone strained, laced with irritation and envy. "And how long have you two been reconnecting? When did you meet again? Is this serious?" "Long enough for us to understand each other," William replied with that same half-smile that drove her crazy precisely because it revealed nothing and implied everything. Melissa stood there for a few seconds longer, clearly hoping to extract more information, but William simply turned back to me and began talking about his recent trip to the Alps, ignoring her completely. I watched her retreat toward Kate, grab her friend's arm, and start whispering furiously, throwing us bewildered, irritated glances over her shoulder. When she was finally far enough away, William leaned closer and whispered into my ear. "She looked like she just bit into a lemon. Peel and all." I burst out laughing, real, deep, liberating laughter that bubbled up from my chest and washed away the humiliation of the past few hours. "She's just not used to me being beyond her control," I admitted. In her mind, I'm always predictable, reliable, the responsible older sister with all the labels neatly attached. And suddenly, bam, I've gone off script. "Even better," William said seriously, looking me straight in the eyes. Let her wonder. Let her get angry. Let her lose sleep trying to figure it out. It's fair after the little show she put on tonight. For the next hour, William played his role flawlessly, like a professional actor worthy of an Oscar. He brought me drinks, not just grabbing something from the bar, but actually asking what I wanted: champagne, wine, water, juice. His jokes were clever and subtle, the kind that made me laugh for real, not out of politeness. He listened with genuine attention and curiosity, something I hadn't experienced from a man in a long time. Not the kind of half-hearted listening where someone just waits for their turn to speak, but real, sincere interest. Every now and then, he would brush my hand or lightly touch my shoulder, gentle, fleeting gestures, but enough to make it look completely natural from the outside. To anyone watching, there was no doubt, these two were together. But it wasn't just an act anymore. He truly wanted to know me. He asked about my work, not the usual, "So what do you do?" but real questions about projects, challenges, what I loved and what frustrated me. He asked about my hiking trips, what trails I'd taken, which summit had been the hardest, and where I wanted to go next. He even asked about my recent trip to London, what I'd seen, where I'd walked, what cafes I'd liked best. "You're nothing like I expected after hearing everyone talk about you tonight," he said between songs when the band paused and we could talk without shouting. "What did you expect?" I asked, smiling. "Well, judging by your sister and her circle," he said frankly, "I expected someone broken, insecure, maybe bitter, a woman with dull eyes who's given up on herself. But instead, I see a smart, funny, beautiful woman. Honestly, I can't understand why you're single. It just doesn't make sense." "Because I have standards," I blurted out, then immediately worried it sounded arrogant. But William just laughed, warmly, genuinely, without a trace of judgment. "And good for you," he said simply, his tone full of quiet support. Something inside me softened, melted, a forgotten warmth I hadn't felt in years. By now, Melissa wasn't even pretending not to stare. She whispered to Kate, then to a few of her bridesmaids, who kept sneaking glances at us, whispering and giggling, desperate to figure out what was going on. Andrew's relatives, the same people who an hour earlier had advised me to lower my expectations and be realistic, were now watching William with admiration and even a touch of awe, recognizing someone of their kind, successful, confident, well-bred. And none of them could comprehend how the supposed spinster sitting beside him had managed to catch his attention. Revenge, it turned out, was far sweeter than I'd ever imagined. But William clearly wasn't done. When the orchestra began playing a slow, romantic tune, something timeless and old-fashioned, like a waltz, he stood up and offered me his hand with that calm, confident smile. "Dance with me," he said, not a question, but an invitation I had no desire to refuse. On the dance floor, when his hand rested firmly on my waist and mine on his shoulder, I could feel every gaze on us, those same people who'd lectured me earlier about being too picky or too unrealistic. From the corner of my eye, I saw their faces: surprise, curiosity, envy, and maybe even a hint of respect. But the strangest thing was that I no longer felt humiliated. Standing there with William, I felt safe. Peaceful. He moved gracefully, effortlessly, the way only someone who truly knows how to dance can. Holding his hand, feeling the warmth of his palm on my waist, it felt right. So right, I almost forgot this was supposed to be an act. "Your sister is staring at us like she's trying to kill us with her mind," he whispered, his breath brushing my ear, sending chills down my spine. "I know," I whispered back. "I saw. She's about to explode from curiosity and rage." "Perfect. Mission accomplished," he murmured, that playful sparkle lighting up his eyes again. I looked up, meeting his warm, golden-brown gaze, and felt my heart skip a beat. This man, someone who'd been a total stranger just 2 hours ago, had somehow restored something Melissa had spent years trying to destroy. My sense of self-worth. Maybe not completely, but almost. At that moment, Melissa approached, dragging Andrew along like a reluctant hostage. Her smile was so stiff and artificial it looked painted on a porcelain doll. "Sorry to interrupt your dance," she said, her voice trembling with forced cheer. "Mind if I borrow William for a moment? Andrew wants to introduce him to Uncle Michael, something about business." "Actually, I do mind," William replied politely but firmly, without slowing their steps. "We're a little busy right now. Business can wait." A storm of emotions flickered across Melissa's face, shock that someone had dared tell her no at her own wedding, hurt pride, anger, and confusion, before she forced out a brittle laugh. Of course, I understand," she said, trying to regain control. "I just wanted to say how happy I am that Annie finally found someone. We've all been so worried about her, haven't we, Andrew? The whole family's been concerned." Andrew gave an awkward nod, clearly feeling the tension and wishing he weren't part of this family drama. "Really?" William asked calmly, almost indifferently, his eyes suddenly cold as winter ice. "That's interesting, because what I've seen tonight tells a very different story. You all seemed far more focused on publicly turning Anna into a lonely failure, an object of pity, than on actually supporting her. Quite a unique way of showing love and concern, don't you think?" His directness, his brutal honesty, left Melissa speechless. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again, unable to find words. Andrew shifted uncomfortably beside her, clearly sensing things were spinning out of control but unwilling to interfere in a family conflict that wasn't his to fix. We just want Annie to be happy," Melissa finally stammered, her voice trembling slightly. For the first time that evening, there was uncertainty, almost childlike confusion, in her tone. "Then maybe you should have treated her with respect and dignity instead of turning her personal life into a circus act for your guests," William replied evenly, calm, but firm enough to silence the entire dance floor. I had never seen Melissa so thrown off balance. Her usual poise, her control, her ability to manipulate, all of it collapsed in an instant, like a house of cards blown apart by the slightest breeze. "I don't know what Anna told you, but," she began, trying to recover, to take back the upper hand. "I don't need her to tell me anything," William interrupted quietly. "I have eyes, ears, and a brain. I can see exactly what's happening here." Andrew, desperate to end the tension and salvage what was left of the festive atmosphere, finally spoke up. "Mel, sweetheart, maybe let's just give them some space to dance, huh? We've got other things to do, the DJ's calling us for the next game." They stepped away, and Melissa immediately turned to whisper frantically with Kate, glancing at us with a mix of anger, confusion, and something that almost looked like hurt. "That was incredible," I admitted softly to William, my voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you. Really. No one's ever stood up for me like that before." "We're not done yet," he said, flashing that same irresistible smile that made my breath catch and my heart race. For the rest of the evening, William didn't leave my side. What followed felt like a performance grander than the wedding itself. When the main course was served, perfectly cooked steaks with sides and sauces, he quietly called over the restaurant manager and asked that we be moved to another table, citing dietary sensitivities and kitchen smells that trigger migraines. The staff, who clearly knew who William was and which family he belonged to, complied immediately without question. Within minutes, our table, the infamous Table 12 for the outcasts, was relocated to the very center of the ballroom, right in front of the stage, under the brightest lights with the best view in the house. The effect was stunning. Melissa's friends and colleagues, who just hours earlier had ignored my presence, now came over themselves, trying to start polite conversations, asking where and when William and I had met, how long we'd been together, whether it was serious. Andrew's relatives, who had spent the evening offering unsolicited advice, now displayed eager, almost servile curiosity, clearly trying to get on William's good side. Even Mrs. Margaret, the same aunt who had advised me to pray for a husband, was now glowing with a completely different kind of energy. Once Kate inevitably spread the news around that William was a successful tech entrepreneur, a Berkeley graduate who ran his own company in London and held shares in several European startups, her attitude changed instantly, a perfect 180. "Well, Annie, you've really outdone yourself," she exclaimed, sliding into the seat next to me with a glass of champagne and a gleaming smile. "Why didn't you tell us earlier you had such a promising young man in your life? We would have treated things so differently. William, darling, have you ever thought about moving back to the States? So many opportunities here now." I sat there smiling, watching this theater of hypocrisy unfold with a strange mix of amusement and sadness. Part of me enjoyed it, seeing how quickly their opinions shifted, how the pity turned into envy. But another part of me felt a quiet ache, realizing that their newfound respect had nothing to do with who I truly was. It was all because of the man sitting next to me, the right kind of man with the right career and bank account. Still, the real triumph, the true peak of the evening, came during the traditional garter toss. When Andrew, already tipsy and cheerful, stood on the dance floor preparing to throw the garter to the single men, William rose smoothly from his seat and walked confidently to the center of the room, calm, self-assured, as if it were his own wedding. "William, wait. You're not single," Melissa cried out, her voice rising in sudden panic. "You're with Annie. This is for the bachelors." He turned, glanced first at me, then at her, and that signature half-smile appeared on his lips. "Technically, Melissa, I'm still single," he said easily. "Annie and I are just taking our time, getting to know each other again. No rush. We're enjoying the process." The garter, as if guided by some higher, ironic sense of justice, arced through the air and landed squarely in William's hands. I didn't know whether Andrew had aimed it intentionally or if it was pure coincidence, fate's little joke, but the effect exceeded every fantasy I'd ever had. According to wedding tradition, the man who catches the garter is supposed to slip it onto the leg of the woman who caught the bouquet. But Olivia, Andrew's 24-year-old cousin, had long since gone outside to smoke and gossip with her friends, completely forgetting about the ritual. "Well, looks like we've got a problem," announced Mark, the DJ, with mock disappointment. "The lady with the bouquet is missing. We need a volunteer. Who's brave enough to try on the lucky garter?" Every single gaze in the ballroom turned to me. William looked at me with a silent question in his eyes, and I, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, slowly nodded. Under thunderous applause, whistles, and laughter, I stood up and walked to the center of the dance floor. I sat on the chair prepared for the moment, and William knelt before me, slowly, gracefully, like something out of a movie, and gently, almost reverently, took my leg in his hands. When his fingers brushed my skin, carefully sliding the lace garter up, it was like an electric current jolted through both of us. I looked up and met his gaze, and in that instant, I knew with absolute, crystalline certainty, this wasn't an act anymore. Maybe it never had been. There was something deep, serious, and real in his eyes, something that made my heart stop and then start racing twice as fast. It was the look of a man who truly saw the woman in front of him. Melissa stood by the wall, pale, her smile stretched so tightly it looked painful. She clutched her champagne glass so hard her knuckles had gone white, watching as her pathetic, lonely sister became the center of attention, the heroine of a romantic story. When the night finally wound down, William walked me to my car. Out in the parking lot, away from the curious eyes and laughter, I finally exhaled, releasing all the tension that had built up during that unbelievable evening. "Thank you," I said softly, my voice trembling. "I know it was all an act, but you saved me from the most humiliating night of my life." "Why are you so sure it was an act?" he asked quietly, stopping and turning toward me. "Because you barely know me," I replied. "I know enough," he said, stepping closer. "I know you're kind, even to people who don't deserve it. That you're strong enough to stand your ground through all that cruelty without breaking. That you're beautiful, inside and out. And that your sister's a fool for not seeing what a treasure you are. Tears filled my eyes, but this time, they weren't from humiliation or pain. Annie, he said gently, I know this started as a rescue mission. But somewhere between that first dance and right now, it stopped being an act for me. Completely. He took out a business card, scribbled a number on the back, and handed it to me. If you ever want to see me again, not for revenge, not to prove a point, but just because you want to, call me. Anytime. I took the card with trembling fingers. What if I want to call you tonight? I asked. He smiled, that same confident smile that had caught my attention hours earlier. Then I'll pick up on the first ring. I called him 2 hours after I got home. We talked until nearly 4 in the morning, about work, about London, about dreams of starting my own marketing agency, about mountain trails, and why good coffee matters so much in the morning. 3 days later, we had our first real date at a cozy Italian restaurant in downtown Chicago. We sat at a corner table, shared a bottle of wine, ate the best carbonara I'd ever tasted, and talked for hours. 3 months later, we were officially dating. He flew to Chicago every 2 weeks, and I visited him in London twice. 6 months after that, I moved in with him. My company agreed to let me work remotely, and eventually, I took the leap and opened the marketing agency I'd been dreaming about for years. Exactly 1 year after Melissa's wedding, William proposed to me, in the very same Golden Valley resort, decorating that infamous table 12 with candles and flowers. On the chair was a little sign, "Table for the happy ones." When he got down on one knee, I already knew my answer before he even asked. Melissa's reaction to our engagement was everything I'd secretly hoped for. The sister who'd spent years convincing me I wasn't enough now had to watch me plan my wedding with a man who truly loved me. But you know what? Real revenge wasn't that. It wasn't proving to Melissa that I was worthy of love. It wasn't showing off the right kind of man. Real revenge was realizing that I didn't need her approval anymore. Not at all. William's respect showed me what I truly deserved, and I swore I'd never settle for less again. Our wedding was much smaller than Melissa's, but 100 times happier. We gathered only our closest friends and family in a little restaurant overlooking the River Thames. Instead of belittling anyone, we simply celebrated each other. Melissa insisted on being my maid of honor. During her toast, she said all the right words, how happy she was to see me in love, how William was the perfect match, how she'd always known I'd find the one someday. Her rewritten version of events sounded almost comical to those who had attended both weddings. But I didn't care. I had someone who had seen my true worth from the very beginning. Looking back now, I realize Melissa's wedding was both the worst night of my life, and the best turning point. Her cruelty forced me to see how long I had let people treat me unfairly. How I silently endured her sarcastic remarks at family dinners. How I'd believed that being 32 and unmarried was almost a sentence. But it was that night, that humiliation she orchestrated, that led me to William. Without her attempt to make me look pathetic, I might never have accepted help from a stranger. I would have politely declined, gone home, and cried into my pillow half the night. But I was so drained by all the mockery that when William reached out his hand, I took it. And it changed everything. Sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are the ones who accidentally push us toward the changes that reshape our lives forever. Melissa wanted me to feel small and alone. Instead, she created the moment that led me to the love of my life. Ironic, isn't it? Trying to prove I wasn't wanted, she simply led me straight to the person who made me truly happy. And the funniest part? A year and a half after our wedding, I overheard Melissa talking to Mom. "Mom, why does everything work out for Annie?" she said bitterly. "I put so much effort into my wedding, and everyone still talks about her romantic story, how she met William at my wedding. She even turned my wedding into her success story." I quietly closed the door and walked away. Not because it hurt, but because I felt sorry for her. She still didn't understand that happiness isn't a competition. Love isn't measured by a husband's bank account or how extravagant your wedding is. True victory isn't about being better than someone else, it's about being happy yourself. 2.5 years later, Melissa and Andrew divorced. When she called me crying, I didn't hesitate. I drove to her house. I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't remind her of that awful night. I just hugged my crying sister and stayed. Because revenge is a temporary comfort that warms you only while you're unhappy. When you're truly happy, revenge loses its meaning. It fades like morning mist. Melissa and I never became best friends, too many scars. But we both learned to respect each other. We learned to stop competing and just be sisters. She still makes her little snide remarks sometimes, that's just who she is. But now her words don't hurt anymore. Because I know my worth. And I don't need to prove it, not with a ring, not with a husband's title, not with anyone's approval. William and I split our time between London and Chicago. My agency has grown to 15 employees, and his company has opened offices in 3 countries. But the best part? We still dance in the kitchen to old songs, laugh at silly jokes, and thank each other every day for the little things. He still remembers that wedding night in every detail. Sometimes he would say, "You know, I noticed you before I came over. You were sitting at that table, so beautiful, trying to smile even though your eyes were full of sadness. And I decided I had to meet the most interesting woman in the entire room." Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if that wedding had gone differently, if Melissa hadn't tried to humiliate me. Would I have met William? I don't know. And I don't want to know. Because our story, with all its pain and unexpected turns, is perfect just the way it is. It taught me that dignity isn't something others give you. It's something you carry within yourself, no matter what. That love doesn't come when you chase it desperately, trying to meet someone else's expectations. It comes when you stay true to yourself, even if others judge you, even if you're sitting at the table for losers. And that the best revenge isn't proving someone wrong. The best revenge is living so happily that their opinion stops mattering altogether. Melissa wanted to break me that night. Instead, she gave me the greatest gift, the chance to meet the man who saw everything in me that I hadn't yet seen myself. So thank you, Mel, for that awful evening. Without it, I wouldn't have this beautiful life. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that dignity is something only you can give yourself, press the super thanks button. It's the little heart with the $sign under the video. Every time you do, you help us create more stories that inspire and remind people that real happiness isn't measured by someone else's standards. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. Share in the comments which moment moved you the most. Have you ever had someone in your life who helped you see your own worth? And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss more stories about how life loves to surprise us. Hit the like button if you believe that true love doesn't come when we desperately search for it, but when we stay true to ourselves. And before you go, check out the story we've left for you here on the screen. We're sure it will also make you think about what really matters in life.